And good morning and welcome to the Skinny for Friday, July 24th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague, creative loafing editor-in-chief Ray Roa. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Mitch. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going really well.
It's a great Friday here in the studio.
Yes.
Like a lot of energy between Down and Dirty and then here.
Well, I'm glad to see John Dingfelder actually in the studio, but he did show me that he had a recent surgery on his hand for...
carpal tunnel or something?
Yes, exactly.
I don't want to
that word can come
facts.
to me. So anyway, but so let's talk about the show today. We've got some really exciting guests. We've got, I'll just say it right now, we've got Democratic House Leader Fentrice Driskell in the studio. We'll be talking to her in just a moment about her race for the State Senate District 14 seat, right? Is it 16? I'm sorry, 16 seat. I'm getting that confused with the Jay Collins District 14 seat. State Senate District 16 against Michelle Rayner. We'll be talking about that. We're also going to have on the show later on Representative Lindsey Cross from St. Petersburg, who, shocked all of us when she announced she would not be running for re-election. She's got a new gig, though, and we'll be talking to her about that. And then, Ray, we might have a few minutes at the end of the show, just chat between you and me and the listeners. And, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the World Cup. I know you're a big soccer guy.
Yes.
And just this whole phenomenon and how it played out in the United States over the last couple months.
You want to ask me about my Kalshi bets?
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, anyway, we have a real exciting show here. So let's get right to it, though. We've got, again, as we mentioned in studio, Fentrice Driskell, very competitive Democratic primary, which is actually not a Democratic primary. It's open to all voters in District 16, Republicans, NPAs, and also third-party members who are registered to vote, of course. And you had to have registered by last Monday to vote in this August 18th primary. Fentrice Driskell, welcome to Skinny.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for calling me an exciting guest.
Yes,
it is exciting.
I'm trying to live up to it.
Well, it's also great to have somebody in studio. Last week we had a couple guests. We had Angie Nixon on, but we had her via Zoom, and we had all these technical issues. And it was like, I want somebody in the studio. We don't have to deal with that. So, Senate District 16. First thing off, let's tell our listeners, because there's definitely listeners who are tuned in right now who will be can vote in this race. But where roughly? It's just both parts of Hillsborough and Pinellas. Can you tell us roughly who's in this district?
Absolutely. So if you're in the university area here in Tampa, I'm talking to you. If you're in Temple Terrace, Seminole Heights, East Tampa, Downtown Tampa, Harbor Island, Apollo Beach, Riverview, Ruskin, Gibsonton. So it's a big swath of Hillsborough County, and roughly 65 to 70% of the voters are in Hillsborough County. But also if you're in St. Pete, so downtown St. Pete, South St. Pete, a little bit of Gulfport. You're also in the district.
Right.
It's gerrymandered to hell.
In fact, there was a lawsuit about this, and I attended it last year about the way that it was gerrymandered, if you will. It has been State Senator Darrell Roussan's seat for the last 10 years, of course. So it's finally opened up here. So now, do you you've been like the New Tampa area, right? Is that where you've always lived? Is that where you...
No, not where I've always lived. I have owned a home and paid taxes in this district for 20. Oh, can you hear me? I can't hear anything anymore. Okay. All right, for like 20 years.
Okay, so yeah.
But yeah, at different points I've lived in different parts of the district, but I'm very familiar with it.
Okay. All right, so make sure everything's good there. So straight up question, because a lot of people know you, know Rep. Rayner. Why should a voter vote for you over Michelle Rayner?
Because, I would ask voters to vote for me over my opponent because I believe that this district deserves a fighter and who will show up and get the job done, regardless of if the cameras are on or not. Former State Senator Janet Cruz used to say she's a workhorse, not a show horse. And I always love when she said that, and I feel a little similar. So between our records, I feel like there's no comparison in terms of the impact and the amount of bills that I've gotten passed, the appropriations that I've brought home for the district, the leadership experience that I have leading this caucus and being someone who has led the fight against the extremism wrought by Ron DeSantis and the Trump administration. I'm ready to serve day one.
Great. And we should tell our listeners we've invited Michelle Rayner on, and she'll be on in 2 weeks from now on August 7th. So we'll definitely hear from her in this race. You mentioned you are a native of Polk County, right?
Yeah,
Imperial Polk County. By the way, I don't know if you've heard this news that there's another high-profile Floridian who is expected to move there there in a few months because he's getting off of government housing, and that's Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Right? We've heard that he's purchasing a home in the exclusive Mountain Lake community in Lake Wales in Polk County. And this became news because the purchase of the home is contingent upon the approval of the membership of the Mountain Lake Club. And we learned this about a month or so ago. I don't think the governor, I was at the first press conference where this was announced, and he was in Tampa, actually. He's not happy to hear that this news is already out there. Any thoughts about that?
Well, if I were him, I wouldn't be happy about it being out there either, because if I'm him and, there's some people who really love him, but there's some folks who think that he's gone way too far, who knows how this vote is going to go? Maybe they don't want that type of attention and scrutiny because it's known for being a very exclusive and private sort of a place. And so you're talking a very high profile Floridian, as you put it. I don't know how
there was actually a vote in the legislature, or there was an attempt to give him security for a full year, I believe, after he left office. And that ultimately did not happen.
Yeah, well, I think so this is a governor who I've always said he's been so obsessed with his own ambition that he was willing to step over everyday Floridians to do it. And he did a lot of things that were hurtful to people, whether it was attacks on history, Black history, attacks on the LGBTQ community, attacks on women's rights, just really an awful governor in my humble opinion. And so, he made a lot of enemies. I could imagine that he would want that security, but I don't think that we've provided this before. And this is something that he should pay for on his own, not on the taxpayer dime.
Right. So a lot of legislation I want to go through with you from happened this past session. And of course, there were, several special sessions after that.
I didn't notice.
Yeah. One of them was, I'm going to bring this up and because I know that conservatives and voting integrity activists are seizing on this news. I'm talking about election security. Of course, we saw the president last week, talk about China and this whole thing about. I think that was kind of very weird. But what's not weird is the push by the president to cast doubt perhaps on this coming up election. And we heard the news of this week about roughly 400 in New Jersey, right? Roughly 400 non-citizens casting ballots up there after about 6,600 residents were improperly registered to vote between June of 2023 and June 2024 because of a software error at the Motor Vehicle Commission. This was announced by New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill. Now, all the people affected had disclosed they were not citizens when seeking either a driver's license or ID, but were nevertheless placed on the voter rolls. Bringing this up now because, of course, we had here in Florida the Florida version of the Florida SAVE Act, which is they're trying to pass in Washington. It's not the same thing because we already have voter ID here in Florida. Have had it for decades. But one thing that is similar is in terms of people starting next year, not for this fall, of course, but next year, voters, because of this law passing, are going to have to show proof of citizenship. And I know that you were and your Democratic colleagues are very much against this. The voting integrity people will point to this thing in New Jersey, even though, again, it's small, and say, that's why we need this. Tell us why those folks are inaccurate there.
I really want to commend, though, the governor, Mickey Sherrill, on jumping into action on this, because this actually happened before. It predates her as governor.
Right, Phil Murray was the governor,
Yeah, she really stepped in and tried to own it and is trying to rectify the situation and ensure that those votes did not sway any particular election outcome. And so I really appreciate that and just wanted to commend her for her leadership. But what we see, the best way to convince people that government doesn't work is to break it. And this is the problem that I have with my Republican colleagues when it comes to things like the SAVE Act. They want to stoke all this fear and say that our elections are unsafe. They are not. But they do this, though, and they do try to make it a very partisan thing and say, see, these Democrats just want, just a free-for-all when it comes to elections. No, we don't. We want safe elections as well, but we just want to be smart and prudent about it. We don't want to put up unnecessary obstacles to people with respect to voting. And unfortunately, that is what's happening with the SAVE Act, including the Florida version of it. So these are the issues that we have. Why can't students use a student ID when they go to vote?
Right. That's a new part they put in in this law that's going to affect college students voting.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what we learned in the legislation this year was that again, because right now, we do have voter ID here. So, folks, that's not an issue. I hear Republicans saying this is an 80-20 issue. Yeah, on voter ID, it is. And it's not an issue here because Florida, as far as 35 other states, I believe, all have voter ID. It's very limited who doesn't in this country. But on the SAVE Act, it is this idea of having to find a birth certificate or passport. Some ways, so when people next year, when they if they re-register or they have not registered. Now, again, if your driver's license is Real ID compliant, you'll be okay. And what we did learn, though, this session was there's still roughly over 800,000 Floridians who do not or didn't, as of the spring, have a Real ID driver's license. So that is potentially that many people who are going to have to go above him. Maybe it's not that hard for some, but we know it is hard for some people to get these documents. And that's the big concern here.
Yeah, and there were other very weird, obscure things. Like if you're a candidate, you have to disclose if you have dual citizenship. Why? Why does that matter? Like you
guys got really upset about that. Like the last day of the session, that was like a new argument there.
Yeah, because it really does feel anti-immigrant, and it feels as though saying if there's somebody who has dual citizenship, somehow they're less American. It just stokes these fears. And if the Republicans cared so much about election integrity, Florida would have stayed in the ERIC system, which is the system, like the national system to catch voter fraud. But we left that system, because they stoked all kind of fears.
Yeah, I've written about that a lot, and there was really no clarity other than the conservative states really like. And by the way, I think we have an alliance with a few states on our voter sharing, but it's not with all 50. Or Garrett did not have all 50, but had a lot of states in there. By the way, if you're just tuning in right now, we're speaking to Fentrice Driskell. She's of course a state representative in the Hillsborough County area, running for state senate on August 18th in the state senate 16 district. And again, that can be Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Gosh, we're only 11:18 already. We have a lot of questions here to go, so we're going to start going quickly. AI, let's talk about that, because I want to say this to you, because Ron DeSantis, I will say this, and I've said this, I don't know if I said this on the air, but I really feel this way, that, I thought it was his finest hour, if you will, like last fall, he came out, right? He was pretty early on. Now everybody hates data centers now and all that, but he was pretty early out and saying, these are a bad thing, and AI, I'm really concerned. When this was discussed initially at the beginning of the session, I think you were asked about it, and you were originally like, I'm not so sure if I want to go the DeSantis way. The President Trump way at that time was like, the feds want to take over. I think you said maybe it should be better for the feds to do this. Have you changed your viewpoint of that?
No, not necessarily. I think that we need a national solution. We're talking about technology that's still emerging. I know it's been around a while, but in terms of like the current usage and the accessibility to just people, right? Like this is a technology that's emerging. I think it makes sense to have a national solution, not a patchwork of states. And I mean, it transcends even America's borders. It's international technology. I think we care about the environment. We care about people being able to maintain their good jobs. I think there are a lot of questions around these data centers, how they're built, where they're built, making sure that there's some local control and local say-so. So there's a lot that has to be untangled with this.
There is a lot. Are you, having heard you say that, are you concerned that there's so much opposition now, and some communities are saying, no, like a moratorium of a year, what have you, that, the folks who are pro AI say, like, we're going to fall behind China on this because we're dropping the ball, and because of this passion about what it's going to do for our energy costs and our water sources, et cetera, that we're going too far the other side here on this.
I think what it suggests is that the communities have questions that are unanswered. So if we would have had this conversation even just a year ago, this is how fast this technology is accelerating. There would have been more concerned about energy usage. Now, a lot of these data centers are self-contained in that they pay for their own energy usage. And in fact, we passed a bill to make sure that they can't pass these costs on to the consumers, onto the ratepayer. So that's a very good bipartisan thing.
Yeah.
So, but being able to educate the community about this actually wouldn't cause your utility rates to go up, and making sure that there are protections for water. But there's a lot of fear around data centers, and rightfully so, because people don't fully understand. And we need to be able to hold these data centers accountable. Though, right?
The Senate passed what they called the AI Bill of Rights, if you will, and I think House Speaker Perez really shut that down. What do you think of that bill? Did you follow it?
I don't remember much about it, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask you something, Rep. You talked about the geography of this district. It's this tiny little corner of St. Pete. Obviously, we're really concerned about that corner. There's people in Gulfport there, South St. Pete. You're widely.
Hey, I live in that district.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You represent represent those people, and Rusan did that really well. How much does geography play in this? You're widely known as like Tampa's rep, right? Like, I mean, the swath of Tampa and Hillsborough that it covers here is gigantic compared to St. Pete. How do you think that plays in this race for you?
Sure, it's still a very important part of the district, and the more I get to know the St. Pete side, the more I love it. It's been beautiful to try to learn that area through the residents' eyes. But what I always tell them is that I've been fighting for them even before I knew that someday, hopefully, I would have the chance to serve them, and that is with my efforts on sickle cell disease. So I've been working on this for years, and in fact, in 2023 or 24, Senator Rusan and I, along with Representative Kelly Skidmore, were able to get legislation passed to create the first sickle cell disease centers of excellence in the state, and we think maybe in the country, getting residents access to these services. There's one here on Fletcher Avenue in Tampa, but also one over in St. Pete. I've gotten funding for the Lincoln Cemetery, which is a historically Black cemetery in Gulfport. This also is an effort that I've worked on for years, trying to preserve and protect Black history through protecting and preserving our historic Black cemeteries. So there's work that I've been doing for Pinellas County and for this district all along the way. And I've gotten endorsements on both sides of the bay. So both teachers unions in Pinellas and Hillsborough, Tampa and St. Pete firefighters, Hillsborough and Pinellas firefighters, first responders. I've gotten endorsements from community leaders like Gwen Reese and Pastor Frank Peterman over in St. Pete. I just got La Gaceta today. I'm so excited about that. I've been endorsed by every Democratic senator who previously held this seat, who also represented both sides of the bay. And it means a lot to me that they believe I can do it.
Okay, now, since we're talking about endorsements, I got to go here, though. One place where you haven't got, the majority of endorsements have gone for your opponent is with your fellow House Democrats in the legislature.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
Yes, because I believe this press release came out that said, I think roughly 22 of the 33 members are supporting Michelle Rayner. What is it? What's going on?
Let's talk about that, because my opponent did file in this race before I did, and that's fine, right? People file when they file, but that means that a lot of my members wound up endorsing her before I got into the race. So a lot of those endorsements are very old. Once I filed, some of those members co-endorsed me. And I happen to know that some of those members actually maybe did not endorse my opponent, that maybe she might be overstating some of the support.
Oh my, do you have any names you can mention here?
I won't mention those names, but we could probably have a conversation offline.
Okay.
But here's the other thing. I'm not so worried about those endorsements. I think my members are great and they're wonderful, and whether they endorse me or my opponent, that is fine. The endorsements I'm concerned about are the people on the ground, the pastors, the community leaders, our teachers, our firefighters, our working families have said that they want me to serve as their next state senator, and I hope I can do that. I'm working very hard to earn that.
One last question on your colleagues, or in this case, maybe former colleagues, and that is there was a couple of defections that happened after the 2024 presidential election. Hillary Cassell in South Florida, and then, of course, Susan Valdez here. I know our listeners are very familiar, most of them probably listening, about what happened with Valdez, who did run for the Hillsborough County Democratic Party chair, and then a few days later was like, I'm out of here. But still, if you look back on that, Fentrice Driskell, is there anything you think about you might have been able to do differently to maybe just stave those defections?
I don't know, because at the end of the day, people make decisions that's best for them, and you can't control what people do. If I could control what people did, we'd have a majority by now in the at least in the House, but certainly in the legislature. And I think that they have to be accountable to the voters. But something that I want to make very clear, because this is a story that doesn't get told, is that in the House Democratic Caucus, we started the 2024 cycle, that election cycle, with 35 members, and we ended it with 35 members. So whereas there were many Democratic caucuses across the country in Republican-dominated states who lost members, we didn't. We had those defections. I really wish that we hadn't, but in terms of holding the line, we were able to do that. And
congratulations, because Paula Stark got thrown off the ballot for good now yesterday. So I guess House District 47, that's going to be a Democrat this fall.
That's going to be a Democrat. I feel good. Like the infrastructure that we built over my 4 years as leader, and it wasn't just me, right? It's like the whole caucus, people contributing dues. We modernized our operations. I believe that the leader designate who's coming in, Christine Hunchofsky, is going to pick up a good number of seats, and I'm so happy for her and proud of this. Yeah.
Rep Driskell, I want to ask you, it takes a certain kind of special person to run and win. Both you and Michelle Rayner have done that. In the top of the show, you talked about the distinction between you two. You said, we need a fighter who's going to fight whether the cameras are on or off. How difficult is it for you to say these kind of things and really, say something like that? Because that's a big distinction. Is it an accusation that Michelle Rayner maybe is performative and whatnot? So I'm curious, One, what is it like for you to really go toe-to-toe with another Democrat that you've had a lot of agreement on? And what does this do to your relationship with somebody, both in the context of your work as elected officials, but also as people who live here?
Yeah, it's interesting. This actually is my first primary, by the way.
Okay.
Like when I ran in 2018, I flipped a seat from red to blue, and that was in the general. So it is a very different dynamic running against someone with whom you have similar values. But I believe that my work ethic actually does set me apart from my opponent. And again, you just have to look at my record, whether it's getting millions of dollars for our HBCUs in the wake of a racially motivated shooting in Jacksonville, millions of dollars for our schools to have school hardening. I got a police reform bill passed in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and worked across the aisle with the Speaker of the House, who, of course, was a Republican then, to get that done. I'm somebody who shows up. I don't look at it so much as an accusation against my opponent. What I have learned in all my years of campaigning, and this goes back even to my student government days in college, okay, is that you have to run your own race. And that is what I'm trying to do here. And in terms of me saying that's a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from these groups that have endorsed me. They tell me, we give you the nod over your opponent because you are someone who shows up. You're someone who stays till the end of the event. You're someone who shows up when the cameras are not on. So I'm kind of parroting back what I have heard. But I do want the district to know that I am the type of candidate, the type of representative who shows up.
Do you think it's a cop-out for organizations? I know you care about the endorsements from the pastors and these people on the ground, as you said, to have a co-endorsement. Voters have to make a decision. They can't circle two things, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's a cop-out? How is that from the inside when you get a co-endorsement?
Oh, I don't know, because, you've got elected officials that are both, people might feel differently about us. Some might go with me. Some might go with my opponent. Some might like us both. People still have to do their own research. And hopefully they check multiple sources, not just a single one. But, I know we were both endorsed by the Tampa Bay Times, different folks within the Tampa Bay Times. And sometimes you have members who co-endorse. I think that's fine. It's up to the voters to decide. But, I'm honored to have La Gaceta, which is headquartered in the district. I'm honored to have the Florida Sentinel, which is headquartered in the district. And we're just going to keep moving in that direction and just continue to show that we're the best team. I'm the best candidate to represent this.
If you're just tuning in right now, that's the voice of Fentrice Driskell.
Get it straight now. Wait a minute.
House Democratic leader here in the Florida legislature, representing District 63 in Hillsborough County. She is, of course, running in the state Senate, District Senate 16 race. We've got a few more minutes with Fentrice, and so I want to throw some more questions at you. You have been critical in the fact the Florida Democratic Party came out this past week officially against Amendment 3. Of course, that's the constitutional amendment on reducing homestead property taxes. My question to you, Fentrice Driskell, is, okay, we get it. There's a lot of things wrong with this whole way this whole thing was rolled out and all that. But maybe let's say for conversation's sake, it does lose. Do you still think that the property tax reform done in a more maybe responsible way is something that could still happen, or do you think that the idea is still going to ultimately hit local governments too much that you shouldn't really pursue this path?
Well, we have to deal with the constitutional amendment that's in front of us. And the one that is in front of us is bad. It's scary and it's bad because there's no plan B. There's no backup. There was no real thoughtful process about how we would make these local governments whole. And when there was a conversation about trying to make the rural communities whole, then that plan kind of fell apart too. So this is bad. We should vote it down. We have no idea. It would mean astronomical sales taxes, I think, by the way. Like, the governments are going to get this money one way or another. I think it's also really important to help people understand what these property taxes go towards, the local services. And when we knock doors, we're able to have these conversations, by the way. And so we explain to people, it's your parks, it's your libraries, it's your first responders. I like it when the firefighters show up at my house when there is an emergency. I like having my garbage picked up. I don't want to see the day that a kid who doesn't have internet access at home goes to the library to try to do their homework and they can't get in because they can't pay a fee now, right? So I think, I don't know if the vote were held today that it would get over the 60% threshold.
Another bill, a controversial bill that passed this year was HB 1471, which allows the head of domestic security to recommend to the governor and the cabinet who can be designated as a domestic terrorist group. As those of us, people have been following this, we know it seems to be really geared towards one group, the Council of American Islamic Relations, or CAIR. Interesting, Governor DeSantis held the law went into effect on July 1st. He rushed to have a press conference that day in Tampa and said, said, basically said, I got the recommendation from Mark Glass, the FDLE head. We're going to get a cabinet meeting going, and we're going to do this. And they haven't done it yet because apparently it wasn't set up properly, the proper procedure. So CARE can't even sue about this law right now in terms of that. My question to you is, what do you, I know you were very critical about this when this was going through the legislature. We know the governor also tried to do this in executive order back last December. I've talked to, we had one of your former Republican colleagues, Joel Redmond, on here a few months ago. He didn't like this bill because he said, hey, Democrat could come into office and, get a recommendation from the Southern Poverty Law Center and try to push that through about a conservative group. Do you believe this is a dangerous law?
It is absolutely a dangerous law. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's anti-American. And, I know the governor seems to have he really seems to want to target that particular organization, but it has stoked a lot of fear throughout the Muslim community writ large. And representing the district I do now, District 67, which covers a lot of North Tampa and Temple Terrace, which has a very large Muslim population, maybe the largest per capita outside of Dearborn,
absolutely.
I've been told. Folks are concerned. And so in having conversations with other groups like Muslims for Democracy and Freedom, by the way, whose endorsement I'm honored to have, this is of grave concern. We need to speak out against this type of extremism, but it can start with one group, but then it can expand. What happens when it's the NAACP or it's, just pick whatever group. I don't need to call groups by name, but it makes me concerned that now we're regulating what people think and how they associate it and just letting basically like the governor decide. This is a problem.
Yeah. A couple other things I want to get to you before we let you go. I saw this article actually this morning. That's what I'm thinking about. John Kennedy in the USA Today network of papers wrote about the Live Local Act, of course, which we all knew passed in the 23 session. Big Kathleen Passidomo, that was her big initiative on trying to deal with workforce housing, maybe not so much affordable housing, workforce housing. But, and we've known this, I've covered this since that law went through. Basically, to our listeners, it allows developers to skip local zoning regulations without a public hearing if they set aside 40% of the units as affordable housing. It has spawned lawsuits across the state as developers push projects deep into areas where they formerly were not allowed. This is still causing, concern years later. This was supposed to be the big push by the legislature to address our affordable housing crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, so I remember this bill. I actually voted it in favor of it. I remember I was really had to be thoughtful about it, but it's hard to vote against $800 million investment in affordable housing. I think the problem is because the majority who's been in charge for like 30 years that kicked the can down the road so much, $800 million sounds like a lot, but it's been a drop in the bucket. The other thing we heard is that some of this is being used for market rate housing, not truly below market rate housing. So on behalf of the caucus, I carried a bill this year that had a glitch fix in this bill and would have required it to be used just for affordable housing below market rate. And we also wanted to provide relief to first-time home buyers who are very low or moderate income and get them savings on their closing costs. So I think there's a lot of good in this bill, but it definitely can be modernized, and I think we should take another look at it. Okay,
let's see. I've got a few minutes left. I want to talk about politics for the last couple questions here. You've got a Democratic ticket that, we don't know what's going to happen in the U.S. Senate race right now, the primary, obviously, between Alex Vidman and Angie Nixon. We pretty much know. I no disrespect to Dottie Joseph and getting in the race late, that David Jolly is going to probably be the gubernatorial candidate for the Dems. There's been criticism. Some think that, especially when he chose Gwen Graham, frankly, that this ticket is too white and too moderate. What do you think?
I think that I don't know if he'd chosen somebody more progressive, they would have criticized him for that too. It's what I really think is that Democrats, I'm going to take a step back. We have got to recognize we are not each other's enemy. And whoever is the nominee, whether it's Rep. Joseph or Congressman Jolly or whoever it is, we have to come together and work like hell to try to win and recapture the governor's mansion. There's too much depending upon it. And Monday morning quarterbacking his choice, like whatever, we got to get out there and talk to voters, register more voters before the deadline, and try to turn out our base so that we can help this state.
We all know that you got elected the same day Ron DeSantis did in 2018, how dramatic the state has changed in terms of its demographics, in terms of it being a swing state at that time to a very red state right now. And that trajectory of Republicans outranking Democrats on voter registration started way before 2018, actually. And you look back on it now, right? The high watermark was when Barack Obama was reelected back in 2012 as a presidential candidate. But I do want to know right now the Democratic Party, and I don't want to, I know you're not going to take a shot at the party chair, and nor do I want you to, but I wanted to, the question more is, has this party, and I know you don't get money from outside anymore, basically, because people nationally don't really think that, it's a state that they want to invest a lot of money in when it comes to, say, the Senate race, right? But can you think there's things that the party itself, structure, can do differently? Because especially on voter registration, it just seems like, the facts are the facts. The numbers keep on getting bigger, 1.5 million more Republicans than Democrats right now.
You have to do partisan voter registration programs. You absolutely do. And I'd love to see the party focus on this more. And I believe it would focus on more if it had more resources. But by the way, this is why, as leader, I established the Florida House Democratic Campaign Committee, which the Republicans have campaign committees, the Florida House Republican Campaign Committee. I established one that allowed us to then run partisan voter registration programs. You have all the rights and privileges of the party, but not necessarily the red tape of the party. And using those types of vote by mail re-enrollment programs, this is how we flip the first special election from red to blue in the Florida legislature since 2018, when we got Tom Keene elected back in 2024, I guess that was. So, you have to have voter registration. It's essential. You have to knock doors and talk to voters and tell them why you're a Democrat and encourage them to be a Democrat too.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Fentrice Driskell from House District 67. I think you said 63 earlier. She is running, of course, to the State Senate District 16 seat on August 18th for voters in Hillsborough and parts of Pinellas. This is going to be on your ballot, regardless of your party registration. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Driskell.
All right. We're going to transition now, and hopefully we've got on the line via Zoom is another House Democrat, and that's Lindsay Cross. Good morning, Rep. Cross.
Hi, Mitch. How you doing?
Oh, great to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Just tell our listeners, remind them about who you are. Lindsay Cross has been representing parts of St. Petersburg and Pinellas Park in Florida's House District 60 district since 2022.
I just want to say hi, Lindsay. It's Leader Driskell. I miss you.
I'm Leader Driskell.
All right. Thanks again, Fentrice Driskell. You're saying Lindsay is representing parts of St. Pete and Pinellas Park since 2022, but suddenly announced just before the qualifying period last month that she would not be running for re-election. Before we talk about your new opportunity, Lindsay, can we just tell what I have not talked to you since that happened. What was your mindset here to leave the House here?
Well, a big reason is what we're going to be talking about. I got an opportunity that really was too good to pass up, and doing work that I'm really passionate about, and a new opportunity to serve the people in the state of Florida.
Okay, so let's talk about that gig, and that is you are now the Florida State Director for the Trust for Public Land, an organization that was founded back in 1972 on the conviction that all people need access to nature and the outdoors. So what actually will you be doing as the Florida State Director for the Trust for Public Land?
Yeah, so thanks, Mitch. So as the Florida State Director at the Trust for Public Land, I'll really be helping to guide our strategy. Florida is a unique and a diverse state. We have some of the most unique ecosystems in the country, but for a lot of people, they don't have access to those areas. And something that's really special about the Trust for Public Land is that all of our work is focused on people, getting people out in parks, on trails, in schoolyards. And so we're really going to be looking at the most impactful opportunities throughout the state, ways that we can get people outdoors, help to improve their health and well-being, bring more community cohesion, social cohesion, just connect people to each other and through the outdoors.
Now, I know you mentioned in your statement, we got the statement about you taking this opportunity, is that you want to work on conserving the landscapes that make Florida unique, expanding trail connections, including closing critical gaps in the Florida National Scenic Trail and advancing the Florida Gulf Coast Trail. And, I have to admit, I did not know much about these. I started looking this up, and it's really interesting here. Okay, so the National Scenic Trail, the goal here is to connect more than 1,500 miles, basically the whole state, right, from the Everglades to Pensacola. Where's that at now, and how many miles of trail gaps are needed to close that?
So there's a lot of gaps within the Florida National Scenic Trail, and one of the reasons is because there's so many landowners. When you have a 1,500-mile trail, some of it is in publicly owned land, places like the Everglades or in national forests, but there's also public owners that may have a portion of it. And so we've got a really exciting initiative with the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation, working on closing those gaps in the Florida National Scenic Trail and actually providing more access through trailheads. We have a grant that we're administering that's going to help to create new public access. And so one of the things that Trust for Public Land does is we identify where some of those key areas are. How can we add public access to those places so we're getting the benefits of getting people outdoors, and then also leveraging the strength and the strategic vision of the Florida Wildlife Corridor.
Rep Cross, I want to ask you about the Wildlife Corridor. It's such a great program. Anybody who's seen stuff like Path of the Panther, it's really heartening to see large swaths of Florida protected for endangered species like that. And then to hear you talk about public access is important. The conservation easements that they use, obviously it allows the property owner to retain certain rights, including selling it or passing it to heirs. How concerned should people be that maybe the next person that gets the land wouldn't want to have that easement and maybe sell it to a developer or something like that?
Great question. I don't think a lot of people really understand what conservation easements are. We understand what a park is and a trail that we can access that, you can bring your families to enjoy that piece of property. One of the concerns with conservation easements is generally they lack the ability for the public to access those. And each conservation easement is written differently. One thing I've been pushing as a member of the Florida legislature and someone who's very passionate about conservation is making sure that our policies and our funding are aligned with not only the natural environment, but the needs of people. And so ensuring that we have adequate funding at the state level and at the local level for these parks and these protected landscapes that do allow the public, people to get out there. And so another strength of the Trust for Public Land is our ability to work with local communities to help find ways to fund those projects, whether it's sales taxes or bonds, ways that they can have dedicated funding for water and land conservation. I think it's critical that we continue to have that tool. There is certainly the need for conservation easements and maintaining some of our productive agriculture, whether it's ranching, timber, or other types. But we also need that focus on those places that people can access.
Speaking of that, Rep. Cross, and we know this was an issue in the legislature. It seems like the way that the Republicans did that this year, they seem, that right now anyway, they don't seem like they're going to want to fund Florida Forever anytime soon.
Well, in November, there's going to be a change in leadership, and so there may be a shift in focus. I think that conservation easements are going to continue to be popular, but there's an opportunity to reinvigorate some of those programs, talk about how critical they are for our state. We know that access to the outdoors really it's a fundamental human need that makes us healthier, both our mental and our physical well-being. Trails and parks can help to provide economic opportunities in communities. And so messaging around that is going to be really important to see if we can reinvigorate some of those past funding sources. Something that used to be very well funded and popular was something called the Florida Communities Trust. And that was a great program because it was matching grants for cities and counties or land trust that had some of the benefits of Florida Forever, those land protection projects, but also of the conservation easements, because there would be a local partner that would commit to owning and managing that land, but using some some state funding to make that acquisition happen. And that's a program that I'd also like to see more focus and funding behind.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. It's 11:45. I'm Mitch Perry with Ray Rowe. We're speaking with Lindsay Cross, State Representative from House District 60 in Pinellas County. She's also now the new Florida State Director for the Trust for Public Land. The other trail we're talking about here, the Florida Gulf Coast Trail. This is, or would be, 420 miles of trails from Tampa to Naples. Where are we on this right now?
So we do have a lot of sections that already exist, but there are, just like the Florida National Scenic Trail, there's significant gaps that we need to close. And we do have some opportunities in the next few months to work on closing some of those sections. One of them is about a 14-mile section in Lee and Collier County called the Bonita Estero Rail Trail, and something that the TPL is really skilled at is working on taking old rail line corridors and creating trails out of those. And so those are really interesting and complicated projects that we have a lot of expertise doing. And so we've been on the ground working with the local community to help work with the conservation finance with a ballot initiative that'll be on the ballot on August 18th during the primary election. And if that is passed by the voters, opportunity to start that work on, again, more than 14 miles of the trail down in Lee and Collier County.
Now, also, of course, we got the new Howard Franklin Bridge going, right, I guess the last year or so. There's, I think, roughly a 7-mile trail. It's really interesting because I see that when I'm driving across the bridge, and I think a lot of people still aren't really maybe aware of this, right? This is designed for pedestrians and cyclists, which connects, of course, St. Pete and Tampa. Would this be considered part of that Gulf Coast Trail?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. So connections, the Pinellas Trail is one of the sections that we already have completed. There are opportunities to even make some expansions within the Pinellas Trail and within Pinellas County. But that Howard Franklin Bridge is, a pretty significant connection because with the Friendship Trail Bridge being demoed probably close to a decade ago, there's no safe way for anyone, unless you're in a car or a bus, to...
Hey, the Cross Bay Ferry's coming back.
Yeah, we've got that. Yeah, I'm all for these alternative modes of transportation, getting people out in the sunshine and the fresh air, whether you're on a ferry, you're walking, or on your bike. Let's keep adding those safe, accessible ways to move throughout our communities.
One more question on that, and that is there a plan? Okay, so we do have that, that trail on the bridge to connect that to downtown Tampa. Do we know of anything of that sort?
So some of the specifics on the trail, we've got a lead at TPL who is focused exclusively on the Florida Gulf Coast Trail and working with a whole suite of partners. So we're going to continue to look for those opportunities where we have willing sellers, where we've got a community that wants to have that extension, wants to have that gap filled, and help them to make that a reality.
Representative Cross, it's really interesting to engage with you at this time in your life, transitioning from, your job in Tallahassee into this one, which I know you're super stoked about. In a way, I guess in my mind, I'm like, oh, go work for the Trust for Public Land. It'll be a little bit more, I don't know if narrow is the right word, but pointed for you. But still, as somebody who enjoys, being on public land, being in really natural parts of Florida, maybe old Florida, some people would say, I still think about, like, where are people supposed to live and how would development play in these areas? Can you talk about the Trust for Public Land in the context of its role in policymaking and maybe politicking when it comes to housing development and things like that?
So I don't think the TPL is ever going to take a position strictly on housing development, but we are certainly open to working with partners to protect land and find opportunities to build parks and trails. And, we have the ability to be really creative in some of these projects. We have phenomenal team members, some of them who have been working on this for decades. And so whether it's CSX, a rail line, or a developer, or a private individual, there's lots of opportunities to add access. And this doesn't have to be 100 or 1,000 acres. This can be a small urban park that is accessible to, a neighborhood or a few hundred people. One of the things that we look at is, does everyone have a park or a green space within 10 miles of them? Often we look at a 10-mile walk, but maybe that's a bike ride, 10-mile bike ride. And so we're looking at ways to energize some of these urban spaces, things like the Florida Gulf Coast Trail that are going through already urbanized areas. This is a perfect example of that. In other parts of the country, we've transformed community schoolyards into community assets. We've done over 500 of them, with the bulk of them in New York City. So there's so many creative ways that we can, find these protected lands and parks that will help, make these communities healthier and more livable for generations to come.
And I am a serious person. I know you're a very serious person, but I have to ask about how this affects somebody very important to you. What does Cooper think about your new gig here?
Oh my gosh, he loves it. Yeah, I mean, Cooper and I have backpack sections of the Florida National Scenic Trail. Sometimes was not the right time of the year. I made the mistake of going in July one year, and no one should be spending the night in a tent in Florida in July. But we've done lots of sections of the Florida National Scenic Trail, and in Pinellas County, right on the Pinellas Trail. That's a place that we go as well. So, this is something that is, very, significant to me personally as someone who loves the outdoors. I guide outdoor adventure travel for women. And so it just aligns all of my interest and the things that I'm truly passionate about.
Rep Cross, we do have a phone call here from a listener, and I want to bring David on. David from Tampa, you're on the air.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for having Lindsay on today. I had a quick question about the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, north of Peterson Road. There's been a big gap in the trail for years now, and wondering if she knows whether that's ever going to get filled in anytime soon.
David, that's a great question. That's one that I can look at. I don't believe it's part of the Florida Gulf Coast Trail. That's going from Naples and kind of circling around Tampa, going over into Pinellas. But that may be an extension that could happen in the future. It'd be interesting to know who some of the current landowners or community groups that are helping to activate that, and see what type of partnerships we could create.
All right.
I just want to mention, too, Orlando is whooping us in terms of these trails. I think they're doing a better job than Tampa, but Orlando area's trails are great.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Thank you, David. And Representative Lindsay Cross, we want to thank you. Again, if you're just tuning in, we've been speaking with Lindsay Cross, of course, is a state representative representing St. Pete and Pinellas Park. She is stepping down in November, but she now is, we've been talking about the last 15 minutes or so, the Florida State Director for the Trust for Public Land. Lindsay Cross, great talking to you this morning. Thank you so much. The best of luck with you on that new opportunity.
Yeah, congratulations. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Get outside this weekend.
Yeah, when I sweat too hard.
With a lot of water.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. All right. Hey, Ray, we've got a few minutes left. Good. So I wanted a couple things. And by the way, there's breaking news in the sports world. LeBron James is signed with the Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. Not coming to my Warriors.
A long run with the Lakers, by the way. The longest run of his career. I'm a Lakers fan, so used to live in L.A., so very proud of that.
Okay, interesting. But okay, this brings up, sports, and, we don't do much of it here, but I just want to think, because on a sociological level, the World Cup is such a phenomenon, and of course it was in America the last, couple months here, or since early June. And I know you're a big soccer guy in a way
Sure.
that I am not. And when we had John Hill from the Tampa Bay Times on a few months ago, and there was, what the heck was it that was going on Saturday? Because it wasn't live soccer here.
It was Premier League Live, so It's this weekend takeover, all the
And
pundits.
that's a European soccer league?
It is the European, the UK soccer league there.
And you were going at like 4:30 in the morning on a Saturday.
Yeah, I ended up going like a little bit later,
but
like
the
6:37.
phenomenon of American soccer fans. It was so fascinating about that because, and my thing about, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about this about the World Cup is because not a big soccer fan, but respect it immensely and know the immense popularity worldwide and even in America. Believe me, I go to sports bars all the time. I see that folks are really engaged in. So I thought this was really fascinating, of course, because it's very much considered a success, in terms of the crowds and although it was an interesting article I just read about, I think it was in The Athletic, about the tourism from overseas. It was up from some countries and actually down in others teams were playing the World Cup. The game itself last Sunday was this big
final
championship
between Spain and Argentina.
Yeah, and again, I became a Messi fan, a Lionel Messi fan. He is like the LeBron James of soccer. But man, what a bust of a game, and it really reminded me like why I don't like soccer. But there's because people were talking about will this change soccer in America and now and I'm not sure other than because we saw the Americans lose and there was a lot of hype.
And the fashion in which they lost, the timing was just awful because the momentum was really there.
And
I was actually in Seattle when they played Belgium. Seattle, one of the World Cup cities, host cities, of course. And I told my brother-in-law at the time, watch, these guys are going to score 4 goals. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. Turns out Belgium was the one that scored 4 goals. So it was kind of a letdown because you thought maybe if we had some kind of success or a great showing in that game, it could really change the prospects for fandom as far as American soccer or football goes,
Yeah, and I just think, again, not to get into the sports aspect of it too much because then people are saying like, now they're all into it. And like, why can't our team be as good as,
That's a discussion worth having, right? I came to soccer because my wife played D1 soccer for the University of South Florida, and they were playing at the Big East at the time, and they were playing these giants of the conference, and I really came to love the game that way. So how do people come to the game? It's certainly not through the youth avenue because it does cost so much money to play soccer in the United States, So yeah, it is interesting. Will soccer grow? I think so. I mean, we have just over in Orlando, Antoine Griezmann has joined the club in Orlando. I mean, one of the greatest stars in French football history.
Right?
So we'll be going over there to see him for sure.
That right?
I think
Okay.
Call coming
hey,
in.
we do have a call here. I think this is not about soccer. This is about manatees and Donald Trump. Julie from Tampa, you're on the air.
Hey, I just want to make sure you all are aware of the latest news the last day or two that the Trump administration, imagine this, taking manatees and about 10 other animals that were on the endangered list that they can hunt, trap, kill, and harass. Manatees, sacrilegious, and these other animals that are on the list. So I hope you all will make sure to write about it, talk about it, and go forward with it.
Yeah, Julie, thank you. And that's really just come across the transom in the last day or so. Thank you so much for that, Julie. Yes, Florida manatees I'm seeing here could be among the species left more vulnerable by the Trump administration's rollback of Endangered Species Act protections. Conservationists are warning. That is huge. And that's going to be super unpopular in Florida.
It's interesting to see, everything is political, but, everybody in Florida loves a manatee, right? So how does anybody turn that into? It's
kind of like offshore drilling. It's going to be a non-starter amongst Florida politicians, and I don't know.
But who among the Republicans will break with the Trump administration's actions on this?
Well, they do kind of subtly, though. They say on something like drilling, and then Trump kind of backs away from it. By the way, let's be honest, okay, this is being thrown out there, and I'm not dismissing it. No, this is very real. I'm getting this, but I'm saying we'll see where this goes. And I mean, you're right. I mean,
I've never seen people get more angry, even over politics, than when somebody touches a manatee at Wiki Wachi. They get scolded by other people around them. People love manatees in Florida. You cannot mess with the manatee.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, okay.
Thank you for that call.
Yeah, thank
Julie.
you.
So, Mitch, are you going to watch more soccer? I know that game.
Probably not.
Spain did what Spain does. I loved watching it just because.
I'm interested in Lionel Messi. I'm into the star aspect of it, and he's 39 years old. And by the way, Argentina was disgraceful though. These guys, they were so angry at the end of the game. They're pulling their back against when the championship trophy gets. Why? You guys get outplayed. I didn't get that.
It was crazy. And I will say this about Messi. I mean, everything is warranted. I've seen him up close down in the bowels there of Raymond James Stadium with Inter Miami. There is an energy around this guy. It is
and he's small too, isn't he?
He's a small guy, and I'm Catholic, so I'll put like Jesus up here, but like when you see Messi walking around, you're like, holy crap.
That is hilarious.
This is the guy.
Hey, that's going to be it for us.
That
Ray.
is it for us. Thank you so much to Representative Fentrice Driskell at the top of the show. Outgoing Representative Lindsey Cross, going to work for the Trust for Public Land. On behalf of myself, my co-host Mitch Perry, we've got Joe Remo on the boards today. On the phone, Skip Sassy on the board. I'm looking over there. I see Joelle and Shilke in Studio One, ready with Art in your ear. Thank you for listening to WMNF Tampa, supporting your community radio station. As Lindsey Cross said, get outside, drink some water, and we'll see you next week with Ken Welch to talk about the St. Pete mayoral election.